Hello, everybody. I'd like to welcome you all to this session where we're going to be hearing about what's really happening in Venezuela. I'm Sue Gray, and I'm on the executive committee of the Venezuela Solidarity Campaign, and I'm going to be chairing the session today. I'm just going to start with a brief introduction to give you the background of what's happening in Venezuela. The country is going to go to the polls again on the 28th of July for the presidential election. There are going to be 10 presidential candidates, including current President Nicolas Maduro, and they're competing in the election in a country that the United States has labeled a dictatorship, despite it holding 30 election processes since 1998. And having a very efficient and sophisticated voting system, which the US Carter Center actually judged to be one of the most secure in the world. Now, this is going to be the 11th election that Venezuela has held since sanctions were first imposed on the country by President Obama in 2015. And this was after other methods of asserting US control and toppling the then President Hugo Chavez had failed. The sanctions are illegal coercive measures, and they're designed to bring about regime change and to secure a compliant administration that won't pose a challenge to US economic and political interest in the region. And the effect of these sanctions has been really appalling. In 2017, 2018, some detailed research showed that the sanctions had cost around 40,000 deaths in that period alone. Now, under Trump, the sanction program was ramped up into pretty much a blockade, similar to what's been imposed on Cuba. And then under Biden, sanctions were maintained until the point where the global energy crisis really forced the US to approach the Maduro government with a view to buying oil. That was around about March 2022. But in fact, it was only after Maduro signed an agreement with the US-backed right-wing opposition unitary platform establishing conditions for the 2024 presidential elections. It was only then that the US sanctions actually eased, and then only slightly. However, now the US has moved again to tighten the screws on Venezuela, reimposing sanctions on Venezuela's oil and gas industry. And in view of President Maduro's lead in the opinion polls against a quite divided opposition, it looks really like they're setting the stage to be able to claim that the election is illegitimate and sanctions must be maintained or intensified. This is what they've done in the past, of course. Now, we've got two speakers today who are going to give us more details about what's happening in Venezuela. But before that, just to say, could you use the Q&A to post information on where you're tuning in from? We're interested to know who's watching. Also, take a note of the article and action links in the chat. And please donate to Venezuela Solidarity Campaign if you can. And also, if you have any questions for the speakers, we may have some time. We should have some time at the end. Could you post those in the Q&A section? Right. Without further ado, I'm going to move on to our first speaker. We're very pleased to welcome His Excellency Felix Plasencia, who's the new Venezuelan ambassador, and he's someone who's also previously held a number of important roles in the Venezuelan government. So over to you, Felix.
Hi, do you hear me? Yeah, good. Well, good afternoon. Thank you very much for this opportunity. First of all, I want to say that I've been here for almost 3 months now as chargé d'affaires, because as you are aware, the government of the United Kingdom doesn't recognize President Maduro as being a legitimate head of government. As Susan mentioned, they follow up what the Americans done by portraying our government as a dictatorship. So for that regard, I'm chargé d'affaires, so I'm a career diplomat and an ambassador. That's my rank. The elections in Venezuela. Well, Susan mentioned many things that are important, and I want to come on all of those. More than 30 electoral events we celebrated during the Bolivarian Revolution in Venezuela since 1999. President Chávez was elected in 1998, and he assumed government in 1999. More than 30 electoral events being celebrated in Venezuela. As the Carter Center said before, our system is very modern and qualifies one of the most modern and perfect in the world. By the way, Carter Center sent an observer team to these elections, and they're there in Venezuela, accompanying our electoral process this 28th. The imposition of unilateral coercive measures really affect a country, not just, and of course, the worst being the death that suffered the country, more than 40,000, as Susan mentioned, but also a loss in terms of revenues to the country for more or less $600 billion to our economy. Venezuela is an oil-producing country that has been doing oil business for more than 100 years, and our production level was more or less 3.5 million per day, and it even went down to 200,000 per day. Nowadays, it's more or less around 900,000, and hopefully, with the investment and the decision of the government, will be increased in the near future. So you can tell by what happened, losing the potential to produce 3.5 million to less than 1, the economy was affected. That is how much the imposition of unilateral coercive measures by the OFAC, the agencies of the government of the US in Washington, affected the economy of the country and produces a real difficult situation. The country's we suffer, and our people suffer a lot because of that. And it's not understandable that a government like the government of President Obama declared Venezuela as an unusual threat to the US. Venezuela, and especially during the times of the Bolivarian Revolution for the last more than 24 years, can be accused of anything but supporting and cooperating with neighbors, and not just with the neighbors in South America, Central America, and the Caribbean, but around the world. When there was times petrol prices were about $100 per barrel, and our production was more than 3 million, we supported initiative as far as in the Pacific Island states. So of that, you can accuse the Bolivarian government, of that you can accuse Venezuela, but as a threat, and mainly a threat to the US, which is the most powerful country in terms of weaponry, is very ridiculous and irresponsible. You can see it as a design argument to go into something deeper and more aggressive. And that happened when President Trump arrived in government and imposed many sanctions, mainly focused to attack the production of oil, that industry, and our exports of that resource. Elections on the 28th are going to be taking place in an atmosphere of happiness, because we celebrate elections always in a happy atmosphere. For us, electoral events are a celebration There are countries not just in Latin America and the Caribbean, and even up north in North America, in where when there is elections, there's attacks in political activists or even candidates. Even some of them been murdered during elections. Something that's never happened in Venezuela, and I'm sure that will never ever happen. So this election is going to be taking place in a country that is under terrible illegal imposition of sanctions, but in an atmosphere of happiness and joy, because that's the way we see electoral process. That's important. That's important to be mentioned, because even though there's aggressive candidates from the opposition threatening the stability, the peace of a country, because it's in their records, and I'm referring not to a candidate, but a supporter of a candidate who is this woman, Maria Corina Machado, supporting this candidate, Edmundo Gonzalez. He is a candidate, but she is a person who is behind that. Maria Corina is responsible to go around. Maria Corina Machado, this lady, is responsible for going around the world asking for the imposition of sanctions to our economy. She's been going around the world, in the US, in Europe, and neighboring countries, to ask for our assets to be frozen in banks, for our assets to be taken, like our oil company in the US, Citgo. And she was a leader of a movement called La Salida, in which she was interested in pushing the government out of government, and in an illegal way, not through elections, but to create instability, unrest, riots in the city, la guarimba, as we call it, in which a lot of Venezuelans were sadly killed, dead, and mainly young people. In those days of La Salida, in those days of la guarimba, led by this lady, Maria Corina Machado, whom is not running for president because legally she's not capable to do it because of the crimes she's committed, and she's not qualified to be running for any electoral position in public government in my country. Maria Corina, I'm sure you're aware of that. She sat in the seat of a foreign country. On that occasion, it was Panama, during a summit of the OAS in Washington. And there she asked for the imposition of sanctions against Venezuela. And for that, she's been judged, and there's a decision by the judiciary power that she's not capable to run, not qualified to run for any electoral position. In that time, when she's done that, she was a member of the parliament in Venezuela. So I'm sure in any other legal environment and legal realities around the world, something like that would have prosecuted and will be sanctioned in a very strong way, as it happened in this case. So that's the atmosphere for this election on the 28th. Even though there's been talks with the government of President Biden, the sanctions are there. The umbrella, the huge umbrella created mainly by the platform designed by calling Venezuela an unusual threat to the US, the Obama decree, and then the more than 900 sanctions imposed by the government of President Trump are all there, active and valid, but only the government of President Biden, because of the energy crisis created by the situation in Ukraine, decided to grant some licenses and waivers to produce some oil to be exported mainly to the US market and mainly to American companies that are present in Venezuela, like Chevron. The situation in the country, as I said before, And I think this is the main thing that we should acknowledge President Maduro for being successful to produce and to deliver and to lead is in peace. Peace is guaranteed. The situation in Venezuela is peaceful. Even though the sanctions are 100% imposed and active against our main interest, personnel, leaders and companies, not just oil companies or airlines and many others, but the economy is growing. There is an important element to be considered, is that the production of crops is improved highly. I mean, out of the worst, something good happened. Venezuela is historically importing all crop production from abroad because of the oil revenues. And since the imposition of sanctions or unilateral coercive measures, that we like to call them, because they're not designed or decided by the Security Council of the United Nations, but just at an agency of unilateral or single government, which is the US. But because of that, we needed to turn back to producing crops, to turn back to agriculture. And we are nowadays producing more than 80% of total consumption in the country, which is a great success and unique in our more than 100 years of Republican life. This last 100 years, we've been a republic for more than 213. But in this last 100 years that coincide with the production of oil, we've mainly imported of goods to feed our people. And now we are a large producer of what we need in our internal market, which is something very important and need to be acknowledged a success by the government in the worst of scenarios. So we're coming to this election on Sunday in a peaceful situation, even though the speech of the opposition people led by this lady is very aggressive. They insisted in everything has to be changed. What this lady is offering is that if they get to win, they will dismantle the whole social system created and facilitated by the revolution in these last 24 years. Whatever her speech and political offer for this election is about creating unrest, stopping the happiness and the safety of a country, because there's no way, if they win, there's no way they could change what we achieved in this more than 24 years without creating chaos and going for confrontation and unrest among Venezuelans. So something that we've managed to avoid was social or civil unrest, and their offer is mainly to create social unrest in the country. Why? One should consider, why is that an offer? What is to gain if you create social unrest? Well, the whole idea is to topple down the government. That's what they've done in the last 24 years against President Chavez before, and now against President Maduro, to create social chaos and to excite the people to come to the streets and try to topple down the government and prepare the atmosphere for a civil war. Venezuela is a rich oil producing country with a strong leader in government. And our position is very strong towards defending our independence and our sovereignty. What they're trying to propose is to dismantle all that and invite foreign governments to come to assist and to be of more incidence in the decision making in the country. There's no way you can go for that if in your plan is not to invite foreign forces to intervene, to participate, and to be part of the equation of whatever happened after a possible result like that. I don't think that is going to happen. I am convinced that the Venezuelans are giving huge credit to President Maduro, even though the harsh difficulties that created something is unique and new and never happened in our historical records, that is migrants, Venezuelan migrants to go abroad, outside the country. It's never happened before. That is unique, that's new. And it has to be with the imposition of sanctions and the economical difficulties. Venezuela is used to receive foreigners, migrants from our neighboring countries, mainly because of the large number from Colombia. More than 5 million Venezuelans are of Colombian origin. And that is happening in the last 50, 60 years. The social and the political crisis in Colombia imposed by the right-wing paramilitaries forced and pushed the people in Colombia to move to neighboring Venezuela. But not just Venezuelans, not just Colombians, but also people from Peru, from Ecuador, from Chile, from Argentina, from all around, and a lot, in millions, from Europe, from Spain, from Portugal, from Italy, and also from the Middle East. Palestinians, people from Syria, and people from Lebanon. There's about a third of the total of the population in Venezuela of foreign origin. That counts for about 10 million people in a country of 30 million. Am I referring to this? Because even though that equation, the country is well coherent and tolerance and inclusiveness is a reality. The foreigners living with us, we don't call them anymore foreigners. We call them Venezuelan of whatever their parents' origins, but the moment they arrive to Venezuela, they become Venezuelan. So now we're facing a different reality of Venezuelans having to be forced to migrate and go abroad. And that's consequence of the imposition of the sanction. And that's something that is, in a way, moving back to what I mean is Venezuelans are opting for moving back to the country lately. And now we have a new mission called Mission Vuelta a la Patria, return to the country, maybe is the way you call it, which I wanted to mention because it's important, and we're also working on that here in London. Though the community of Venezuelan here is not that large, but it's still larger than historical numbers or historical figures. We are still today, by the record at the Migration International Organization, one of the 3 countries in Latin America, they produce the less of migrants and that receive the most, with Argentina and Uruguay. In the records, we're facing a conjunctural reality due to the imposition of sanctions. So that is really something that we need to overcome. And hopefully, if President Maduro is re-elected on the 28th, and the elections are going to be seen because they are transparent, open, free, competitive, as they like to say nowadays. And President Maduro is accepted as a legitimate president of Venezuela, and then things will change in the country for the good. So I am convinced that we should all go, Venezuelans and foreigners abroad, friends of Venezuela, real friends of the country, should go for having a transparent, open, competitive, and free elections, which are going to be taking place on the 28th, as it happens before, with a system that has been qualified as one of the most advanced transparent, and modern in the world. And then we should have the opposition acknowledging the results. President Maduro called the opposition's party to sign with him an agreement in which we all agree that we will respect the results. But that candidate that is supported by this lady, Maria Corina Machado, did not sign that agreement, which is suspicious, just to say the least. But hopefully, the results are going to be so good that there's no way they can deny that. And for that, we have electoral observers. We don't call them observers, we call them companions, because nobody needs to come, and we don't need anybody to come and observe our election. We invite them to accompany us during this electoral process, and not to observe, because we deny that more patronizing kind of attitude. We don't need to have anybody observing our election. Just the Venezuelans need to observe the election. They're invited to accompany us as before in this new electoral process, to be convinced and to tell the world that it's peaceful, is a happy event, is a party kind of for the whole country. The participation is large and is always, as it's always been. And the system is very transparent, modern, and efficient. So hopefully results will confirm the support that President Maduro has got, which is very large, huge. And hopefully the international community will be convinced that the elections were transparent, will observe that the elections were transparent by their companions there, and they will accept that President Maduro is being re-elected by the Venezuelan people as our president for the next 6 coming years. The opposition is saying that the results is in their favor, that the numbers are positive to their interest. Well, they always say that. It's not new. They've never accepted defeat in the electoral process before. And when we've been defeated, we immediately accept defeat. That's again, an important difference. And it's the same people that are leading in the opposition group, and mainly with this candidate Edmundo Gonzalez, the same people that are been there before. Some of them not in the country because they're avoiding the judiciary in the country. So some of them are in the U.S., supported by the U.S. government, and living maybe thanks to our assets and revenues being frozen in that country. And some of them are in Europe, mainly in Spain, and some of them are in neighboring countries as well. But it's the same people. They always claim that the elections were fraudulent, not transparent. They never accepted the results. And they went all around the world to try to convince the international community that the process is rigged and the President Maduro is not legitimate. So that is the situation. That is the reality. And I am convinced. Of course, that's what I want to happen, and that's what I'm a political appointee. I support the government of President Maduro. I will vote for him. I can openly say that, even though I'm the head of the Venezuelan diplomatic representation in London, but I'm not doing any proselytism activities in this jurisdiction. I'm just telling you here my political position, which is the reality, which is what it is. But I am convinced the Venezuelan people is giving large credit to President Maduro for making possible the peaceful situation in the country, for making possible the growth of the economy in the last 2-3 years, for making possible to be independent and sovereign, and for making possible to have a country that is still today in the worst of reality and scenario, still supporting, still committed to cooperation and solidarity with our neighbors in Latin America, Central America, and the Caribbean. I don't know if I should stop here and let Francisco comment on something, and then, I don't know. Let me know.
Thank you very much, Felix. That's a very interesting background. Lots of useful details there. I'm just noting that we've been joined, really pleased to be joined by so many people from across Britain and beyond. We've got Surrey, Islington, Penwith, Haringey, Christchurch, Derby, Manchester, Stockport, Newcastle, Birmingham. I won't list them all. We've even got somebody from the USA. So really good to have so many people tuning in. Next, I'm going to turn to Ben Hayes. He's a volunteer from the Venezuela Solidarity Campaign, and he's just going to tell you a little bit about the campaign that we're running. Ben, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just do a quick run through of what the VSC is up to and how you can support the campaign. Starting with the latter, there's a link going up in the chat to donate. If you're able to provide any sort of financial support, it's very much appreciated, particularly in such a significant period for Venezuela. Also, after the change of government here in Britain, we're looking to up the pressure on the issue of the Venezuelan gold, which is still being held by the Bank of England worth billions of dollars. There's a link being posted in the chat to the statement, conflict return. So please do sign and share that around your networks. And on the topic of the upcoming elections, there's going to be an online event at 6:30 p.m. on Monday, the 12th of August. We'll have reports from international guests who are going to be eyewitnesses to the electoral process, including our next speaker, Francisco and Calvin Sucker from the Morning Star. So more details and registration on that are available in the link provided in the chat. Once again, if you're able to support the campaign in any way, it's a huge help for getting together events like this and all the campaign activity we do. So thanks very much for joining us this evening, and I'll hand you back to Sue.
Great, thank you very much, Ben. Okay, now we move on to our other speaker from Venezuela Solidarity Campaign Secretary. I'm very pleased to introduce you to the well-known Latin American expert, Dr. Francisco Dominguez. Francisco, over to you.
Thank you very much, Sue. I want to talk about the context within which this election is taking place. I think it's quite important to have that clear. The election takes place in a context dominated by Venezuelans' incredible economic recovery. In June, the figures for inflation were 1%. And I remember that Mrs. Lagarde, the IMF president, indicated that the inflation in Venezuela was going to reach 1.5 million%. There was a huge amount of inflation. So being able to reduce it to 1% is just extraordinary. It's near miraculous. That's the first thing. And this is despite 930 sanctions, which are very brutal. I mean, the sanctions were being quite brutal. Only in 2017 and 18, something like 40,000 people died unnecessarily as a consequence of these sanctions. And we are talking about pregnant women, chronically ill people, people that need dialysis, people that need a cancer medicine, and so forth. Children with chronic problems and so on. That's the first thing. This is confirmed, in my view, by the fact that so far, in terms of the Vuelta a la Patria, the return to the homeland mission, which is the government of Venezuela has to bring, people who left the country back. The information is that something like 900,000 have come back, possibly 1 million. And this is continuing all the time. The government organizes planes to go to the places where Venezuelans are, and they come back. Now, the key thing is here to understand is this. The these people who left the country are not going to believe the government necessarily if they tell them to come back just because things are good. They, I'm sure, check with their relatives, their friends and contacts and so on before coming back. And it's their friends and their contacts and their families and relatives who are telling them, yes, do come back because things are looking up. So that's quite important to understand. So this is the context. In terms of the campaign, the electoral campaign itself, the level of mass mobilization organized by Chavismo nationally throughout the country. I don't know how many hundreds of meetings, rallies have been organized, literally every single day, in so many places. They compare massively in terms of size and enthusiasm with the rallies organized by the opposition, particularly the one Edmundo González led by Maria Corina Machado. An indication that they're weak is the fact that they produce photos of a big rally that actually is a photo from a rally that they held in 2012. And this has been discovered. And then the opposition typically used that photo also in 2019. So clearly they need these sort of props in order to try to suggest, particularly to international media, that their election campaign is going extremely well. One wonders about the claims where they're already preparing the ground to say that the election's been rigged. There is no rigging at all. In fact, the elections in Venezuela are organized in such a way that there are 16 audits. It is the most audited election system in the world, and is also the most observed election in the world. And so far, nothing has been discovered. Every time the opposition loses an election, goes to the media and says there have been fraud, but they never actually lodged a specific complaint indicating exactly what happened, where and how, for them to be able to claim election fraud. I remember vividly when Hugo Chavez won the referendum, the recall referendum, in August 2004, when opposition leader Henry Ramos Alup went on national television, international television, more than national television, to say that he had the evidence to demonstrate that actually there had been fraud. We're still waiting for that information. This is how many years? 2004 to now? We're talking about, a long time ago. So the election system in Venezuela, which I've observed on a few occasions myself, is foolproof, is totally digitalized. And that's what led former President Carter to say publicly after he observed the elections and after the Carter Center observed several elections in the world, 92 electoral processes the Carter Center observed before former President Carter came with the statement saying that Venezuela has the best electoral system in the world. Now, obviously, the reason why the opposition is not popular is not only, and the rallies are weak, is because the opposition, the right-wing opposition, is fragmented. Before, in all the elections before, they used to be very united around one single candidate, and everybody did one thing. Now they're fragmented. There are 9 opposition candidates, and one is President Maduro. That's number 10. And the one led by Maria Corina Machado, which is the presidential candidate, is Edmundo González. According to the polls that we can trust, is running at a rate of something like 20%, perhaps even less. President Maduro is in the region of 52 to 56%. It makes sense because the opposition is not very popular because their program has been revealed. They produce a program, would you believe it, in English. It's called Venezuela, Land of Grace. It has 85 pages. And this was somebody like, I think it was Luis Brito Garcia, one of the best intellectuals in Venezuela, who actually did the searching and finally found it. And this is a program of a plan of government that was produced by Maria Corina Machado and her cronies. And in the program of 85 pages in English, which has been translated into Spanish and publicized by the Chavistas, actually, because otherwise they were hiding it from everybody else. The program of the plan involved a massive level of privatization. Literally everything is going to privatize. Just let me give, the health system is going to be privatized so that the system is going to be, according to the plan, something, an insurance-based health program, like the one you have in the United States, which is not brilliant. They propose to privatize the oil and gas industries. They propose to privatize all state assets and all state public property, absolutely all of it. They propose to privatize the education system. They propose to privatize the pension system. They propose to privatize, I mean, you name it, they want to privatize it. And Maria Corina Machado is absolutely adamant that this is absolutely essential, because if this is not done, then there is no possibility of recovery in the country as she understands it. They even propose to abolish the labor plan, which is the labor legislation that was one of the most advanced in the world, that was signed by Hugo Chavez some time ago, and we wrote a review of that program ourselves in VSC, I remember. So it's extraordinarily interesting. Number one, they were hiding this program from the population, and they were demanding that the government, was clear about what it wanted to do. And the government is very clear, because he's been saying exactly what he wants to do, and has been doing all the time. But once this program of theirs was actually revealed, they condemned the government for doing it. They said they had no right to do so. And this is a very peculiar situation. So if you put all of these things together, it's totally clear that they are not very popular. So the final point I want to make about this, not to make it too long, is that the message of the campaign of Edmundo Gonzalez is a message of threats. Maria Corina Machado is constantly threatening the opposition, constantly threatening the government, constantly threatening, implying that they're going to unleash violence all the time. One of the latest threats is that on the day when the election results are announced, which they're not going to accept apparently, they intend to organize a big march on the presidential palace of Miraflores. You can imagine what that means. That is to say, if they go there, with their people, which are going to be excited by, encouraged to actually engage in violence, have done that before, then clearly that is the case. And one of the main shortcomings that they have is that Edmundo Gonzalez is very ill. His health situation is very bad. I mean, he's somebody who cannot hold. And this is literally by me watching videos literally every single day. He's not able to hold the microphone on public events by himself. When he does it, Maria Corina Machado has to help him to hold it. He cannot speak for too long. He speaks very briefly for about a few minutes, 5 minutes maximum. When he's got to go on the stage, he has to be helped by everybody else, by several people who actually help him to go onto the stage. He walks very slowly. He speaks very slowly. His hands tremble all the time when he's being interviewed. And he had recently, I think they call it descompensación, which is a sort of crisis. And he had to disappear for a couple of days. So I hope I don't offend anybody by saying that when compared to Joe Biden, Edmundo, Joe Biden, when he's compared to Joe Biden, I think Joe Biden looks like a 5-star athlete compared to the quality and the ability of Edmundo Gonzalez to do it. So you cannot excite the population with that kind of thing. So it is very important finally to understand the following. Were they to win, which God forbid, I don't think they will, were they to win, they will dismantle everything that's been gained by the Bolivarian Revolution, by the people as a consequence of the Bolivarian Revolution. Everything, you can see in their privatization program, which is across the board, literally everything is going to be reversed. And it's going to be reversed to pre-1998, that is to say, pre-Hugo Chavez presidency, or even worse. But that cannot be done without a huge amount of violence. If you look, for example, at the agreement, the contract that Juan Guaidó, because it's the same concept that they have, Juan Guaidó signed with the mercenaries in May 2020. At the time, the contract specified very precisely that they were to enjoy legal immunity in order to actually clean out the whole country from Chavistas. And because they were given the task to dismantle whatever was there. So you can, the army, the armed forces, Chavista organizations, social organizations, everything will be dismantled, and you have to be persuasive strongly if you want to, dissolve the Chavista organizations. So it's extremely important to understand that they cannot get their way unless they use violence. On this particular occasion, it's extremely important that we redouble our efforts to actually write things to the Guardian, to the media that are lying about the actual situation that is taking place in Venezuela. And it's very important to defend the victory which is going to take place on this 28th of July. Because the will of the people of Venezuela must be respected. This is our responsibility. And finally, if you haven't joined the Venezuela Solidarity Campaign, do it as soon as possible, because we need you in every possible way. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Francisco. That's very, very interesting and useful. We've just got time for a couple of questions to be answered quite briefly. I'll just read them out. The first question is it true to say the main regional powers in Latin America now, such as Brazil and Mexico, respect Venezuelan sovereignty and will recognize the results? And linked to that, there's a question from David Raby on Zoom. Would the speakers like to comment on Venezuela's relations with Colombia at present? So that's sort of one issue, the kind of regional solidarity. And the second question from a YouTube viewer, which may be partly answered by Francisco already, but could the speakers expand more on the issue of the social programs being dismantled if the right-wing opposition win on Sunday? So those are the two issues, but we just have time for quite brief answers, I'm afraid. If either of you would like to have anything to say in response to those. Felix, anything first? I think you're still on mute.
Mute, yeah, I'm on mute now, yeah. The relationship between the Venezuelan government and the government of Brazil and Colombia are very good, fantastic. President Lula is a socialist, is a progressist, and is a good, responsible leader, and he's always been very responsible. You cannot say that he's subjective. He's very objective and responsible in whatever he says all the time. So being said that, what we get from Brazil is a responsible approach to a process they know and acknowledge as legitimate, clear, transparent, and competitive. And what they are saying, and they say before, is they're ready to accept and support the results of the election. As I say with Colombia, the government of President Petro is also a progressist left government, and President Petro himself is a responsible president, somebody that we like a lot. It's very close. He travels a lot to visit President Maduro in Caracas since he became president. I was ambassador to Bogota And actually, I opened a certain new relationship with Colombia after 7 years, no relationship during the time of President Duque and before at the end of President Santos. So both leaders have said that there is for the Venezuelan people to decide whom they vote for, and they understand and believe that the process is legitimate, that the system is professional, and they were waiting for the results to be acknowledged and recognized. That's what I think we get from Brazil and Colombia, important neighboring countries, and a different situation than we had before when Bolsonaro was in Brasilia and Duque was in Bogota. There was no acknowledgement of the Venezuelan government. There was no relationship. Everything was very difficult. And on that time, you could say that they were subjective and willing to topple down and support any program to topple down the government of President Maduro. The other question, social program, I said it before, and Francisco perfectly said it. Their program is supported in their proposal to dismantle anything social that's being created for the good and to dignify the life of our people in my country. If they were going to do that, they would create social unrest, chaos, the peace will be taken away, and what we can have left is a total disaster, riots, and social confrontation amongst Venezuelans. So either if they win, which I don't think is going to happen because I am convinced the Venezuelan people got credit to President Maduro, and they acknowledge that he's trying his best, even though the worst scenario because of the imposition of sanctions that really affect our economy, because sadly, we're very much dependent on the production of one product, which is oil. So if they were to deliver what they're proposing and not cheating on people because telling them lies of what they're going to be doing, they will create a total chaos. And the only answer to that is inviting foreign powers to intervene, which is something they've been saying around the world when they go around. Being the OAS, or being Madrid, or being Bogota, or being Washington, or being the capitals in Europe, even here in the UK, when they came, and they were well welcome, because they're atomized in 9 candidates. That's true. But the same group of people that asked for sanctions before are those supporting Edmundo through Maria Corina Machado, because as Francisco put it, and I don't want to say anything about this gentleman because he's an old man whom I know. He's a career diplomat, and I know him for many, many years. He's incapable to run a campaign, and obviously he would be unable to run a country confronting this difficult scenario. The one today with the position of a legal coercive measure, and the one possible if they decide to impose their proposal government, which is to dismantle everything social. Whatever is in their offer is chaos, is negative, is sad, is bloodshed, is terror for our people.
Thank you, Felix. Francisco, any responses to the 2 questions?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, Brazil is sending a delegation of people who are going to look at the election as well. So that's fantastic. In terms of the social program, the dismantlement, this is the way I understand it. The Venezuelan oligarchy is deeply parasitic. They depend very heavily on siphoning off the resources accruing to the state, particularly from oil revenues. This is what they did for 50 years, if not longer. So from their point of view, to guarantee, to secure their position inside, they need to dismantle everything that benefits Chavismo and benefit the people. And they can secure that by bringing in powerful international interests that will be supported by the military might of the United States and the European Union. So this formula is the one that they're thinking of. That's why they're going so heavily on the question of privatization. Imagine if you privatize the pension system, if you privatize the oil industry, the gas industry, and so on, and you get all these huge companies that are going to be supported by the State Department, this, Southern Command and everybody else. So they want to secure their rule by imposing the equivalent of a nasty dictatorship, which is going to be supported externally. That's the only thing they can do, because they know, and they've been convinced, they've been doing this for 25 years, they cannot win the election because whatever they propose is extremely unpopular and they're so discredited, very, very discredited. Just a small footnote, which would take 10 seconds. Many politicians from the right wing are already defecting, councillors, mayors from cities, not one, several already. There is a stream, a small stream, but it's still a stream. Even a presidential candidate for the primaries, the other position, somebody called Prosperi, actually defected publicly. And the reason why he defected was he said, these people are corrupt. They are intolerant. They are full of hatred. And they're robbing the states, robbing the assets of the government, and they enriched themselves with this. And he declared himself for President Maduro. Every single one of these politicians at various levels who have defected to Maduro are already supporting President Maduro. So there is no possibility that the media internationally that parrots what they claim over there, the right wing, that Edmundo Gonzalez is running high in the polls. No way, Jose. I'll leave it there.
No way, Jose.
Thanks very much, Francisco. That's very good winding up our meeting this evening. I'd like to thank everybody for attending, and especially to our speakers. And just to remind you all to please come to our August report back, where we'll hear from the people who've gone over from the campaign to observe and accompany the Venezuelan elections on Sunday. And also please to remember to take a note of all the article links and information in the chat, which gives you information about the campaign. So do join Venezuela Solidarity Campaign and donate if you can. Thank you very much.